systemic differences that won't change, but will lead to changes in business practice and distribution chains, be that EU to GB, GB to EU, GB to Northern Ireland, or Northern Ireland to GB. And we also want to look at potential opportunities that come out of this change and the support that is there for business. So let me ask fellow panel members to introduce themselves. I'll start with Chris Tyas, who is chair at GS1 and crisis chair of the Food Resilience Industry Forum. Chris.
Yeah. Thank you very much indeed, Warwick. Yes, so I'm Chris Tyas. For the last 2 and a bit years, I've been the chair of GS1 UK after a lifetime in manufacturing and supply chain and procurement in international CPG companies, finishing up as the global supply chain head of Nestle, based in Switzerland. For the last year, though, I've worn a different hat. And that at the beginning of the COVID crisis, I had a call from a couple of the CEOs of the major retailers asking me to step into government. And I've been doing a role as acting director of food supply and chair of something called Food Resilience Industry Forum. That's a group, an end-to-end farm-to-fork group of some 160 retailers, manufacturers, logistics providers, and growers who've been tasked with ensuring food security for the country through the twin challenges of COVID and EU transition, particularly in the winter months. Over to you, Warwick. Thank you. You're on mute, Warwick.
Thank you, Chris. First one. I'll move on to Victoria Boldson. Victoria is founder and CEO of Bolst Global. Victoria.
Thanks very much, Warwick. Good morning, everyone. So I'm Victoria Boldson. I'm the founder of Bolst Global. We are an international trade consultancy and export solutions provider specialising in the food, drink and supplement industries. So we help companies effectively to grow their business strategically overseas. We work and support some of the biggest well-known grocery brands in the UK, up from large organisations down to smaller challenger brands who are doing some really innovative things in the F&B space, particularly within the health and wellness segment. I've been asked to come along today to share some of the experiences that we're finding with our clients and communities post-transition, some of those teething problems which Warwick mentioned previously, and hopefully provide some practical tips and advice for the listeners on today in terms of how to get over this, overcome this, and look at the wider opportunities in the longer term that will hopefully come in the future.
Thanks, Victoria. And thirdly, Jatin Bhurabhai. Jatin is an e-commerce specialist at the Department of International Trade. Jatin.
Morning, everyone. Hi, I'm Jatin Bhurabhai. As Warwick just said, I'm an e-commerce specialist at DIT. My team and I work on the development and delivery of policy around e-commerce for international trade. DIT is the Department for International Trade. It is one of the economic departments of the UK government. We're based in Whitehall. Our job is to promote British trade abroad and to encourage investment into the UK, practically, not just through promotion. So I work with businesses closely and with trade associations to identify and help them take advantage of opportunities in e-commerce globally, whether that's direct first-party.com stuff or working through marketplaces, looking at their strategy and their implementation to maximize those opportunities. I work really closely with the retail and consumer team as well. So we sit side by side as a sister team. And the way that DIT is made up in terms of the sectors, so we kind of cover all the major industries of the UK, from education to creative media to advanced engineering, all those sorts of things. And we kind of see e-commerce as a layer that kind of is touching so many different types of industry, not just retail, consumer, luxury, the kind of ones that you would naturally consider. And so, although we focus primarily on the ones that you'd normally imagine, we're trying to then look at other things and other parts of the economy that we can help to. And digital is going to be a major focus. Has been, but will continue to grow in terms of the importance of focus for business and for trade in the future. Background-wise, I'm a specialist, which means I've come from the private sector to help the team. So I'm not a civil servant. So I've worked in industry at major big box retailers, e-commerce, pure play, worked in startups, in data and fintech, and in retail and commerce as well. So I've got a good breadth of experience, and I've seen trade and international trade through both the buyer side, the seller side, and now governmentally.
So Greg, Jatin, thank you very much. I'm sure everybody agree we've got a broad range of expertise there. We'll come back to some of the opportunities that Jatin mentioned, but we'd like to kick off looking at how British businesses have had to adapt since the UK left the single market at the end of transition, and what was done in advance of that. And perhaps, Victoria, I could ask you initially to talk about the work that you've been doing to help your clients navigate new paperwork, maybe different supply chains and tariffs.
Yeah, thanks very much, Rob. And it certainly has been a challenging start to 2021 post-transition. We've seen, obviously, like you mentioned, the paperwork side of things is a huge change for businesses trading with the EU now. Some of the documentation that's never been required before is suddenly now required, and equally within the paperwork itself, some fundamental changes and additions to documents such as commercial invoices that do need to be required, because let's not forget now, these documents are also acting specifically as customs documentation as well. So it's vitally important, and we've seen a lot of companies who have needed to review their internal processes when it comes to their paperwork. Certification is another area whereby, again, things such as health certificates, vet certificates for products of any animal origin, phytosanitary certificates for any plant-based products with seeds involved, is suddenly something that businesses have had to adapt to, have had to obviously start producing and providing. And for those companies who have not traded beyond the EU, this is a new ball game for them to adapt to. Now, that is not just understanding what is required, but equally the time that it's taken from their internal perspective and resources taken up by this, and equally the cost. Let's not forget, some of these certifications do come at a cost, which then needs to ultimately be factored into some of their pricing structures now. So we've seen a lot of problems, particularly around the paperwork and an upskilling of understanding what is now required and why, particularly those companies who are not trading outside of the EU, and the EU has been their main and only place for international business so far. So I think it's certainly been difficult times. There's been issues also around some of the new labelling requirements, obviously, and the food business operator address as well. How to handle that when companies do not have their own EU entity elsewhere, or they do not have the ability to put importer details on their packaging as well. So there's been a number of issues and adaptations and continuing teething problems, and equally, what we've also seen is, because every member state is interpreting the new legislation differently, whilst it may have been quite easily, smooth, shall we say, smoother to suddenly get products into France, when it's come to the Spanish, we found particularly the Spanish authorities have been quite draconian and quite onerous in the paperwork requirements that they've been asking for, whereas we've not had the same experiences with some of the other member states. So it does seem to be market by market, very, very different requirements, and having to get internally within businesses the understanding from some of the technical team, for example, as to why some of this very specific detail that's now been required by certain member states is needed and for what purpose. And obviously some of that is quite sensitive information, recipes, ingredients that have been asked for in order to release goods has been difficult as well for some of those suppliers to comprehend, but equally provide as well. So a number of issues on that front, I would say.
Yeah. Thanks very much, Victor. I'm just looking at the questions. I think Chris may have a point to make here. I mean, a number of the questions we've seen coming in have been either about the time that the new certifications and clearances are taking, or the difference in interpretation between member states. I wondered if you had any insight on whether we're likely to see that the process gets slicker as everybody gets more used to it, and probably a slightly more unfair question about whether you expect to see any standardization of approach between the member states. And I should say, as an example, I've got a client who sent a truck from Leeds and he got as far as the Turkish border before it was turned back. So some of these are real substantial issues. Any insight on that sort of thing, Victoria?
Yeah, I mean, it's difficult to say in terms of, like, say, standardization. Our experiences with our clients and community is that it's still very much everybody finding their feet. Equally, let's not forget as well, customers overseas in the EU member states are equally a little bit at sea with this. They're still also trying to get their heads around what is required. One of my clients has a customer in the Canary Islands, for example, and they're wanting to bring a full container load over, but they've hesitated because they've also had to spend the last 2 months understanding what rules and requirements will be required from the Canarian government when they bring that container across, and obviously a hesitancy to not do so. And they've been asking for feedback around, okay, what's happening when things are going into, for example, the Spanish mainland, and trying to make sure and mitigate any issues when that container does arrive at port, so there's no hold up and delays and all the paperwork is in place. So they've taken a bit of a step back and waited to see and get some learnings that we've had through supplying other EU customers in order to have the confidence to obviously bring that container across. And I think there's a number of EU suppliers that are in the same situation at the moment and still a bit hesitant, but equally needing goods. So it's trying to understand what's going to happen in the longer term. I don't know if there'll be any standardization, if there's going to be with timings, what's going to happen. And I'm not sure if Chris has got anything he can comment on with regards to that potentially.
Chris.
Okay. Well, I think Victoria's given us a good lead in, because whilst Victoria's primarily talked about exports from the UK, I'd like to just talk about imports for a second, because although the various non-tariff barriers came in for exports from the 1st of January, there was a grace period on imports and goods coming into this country. But we're now within a month of the first phase of that. And I think that's why I'm changing. And that's why the important word for me entirely is preparation. Because this time we have a little bit more time, because from April the 1st, the first set of provisions in terms of pre-notification applies to goods coming into this country. So goods coming into this country from the EU will, from the 1st of April, require pre-notification on IPAFs. Goods will start to require that of animal origin, or high-risk products of non-animal origin will require EHC export health certification, which goes back to the origin and the safety of the product. Now, the fortunate thing is that there will not be an enforcement of that, that means there will be no physical checks until at least July the 1st, and then they will be a sampling one. So if I come back to my words of preparation, then I think this is a very good chance to really get prepared properly and understand what the notification is. So we're seeing quite a lot of people who have had, in the chat, who've had vehicles returned or not even vehicles be able to get into markets on the continent. I think we have the opportunity in terms of inbound goods to be able to have 3 months trial run without seeing those be a complete barrier to trade, without seeing any vehicles returned or opened or anything like that. But the important thing is to get advice, to try it, not just see the fact that the full checking is not going to take place until July the 1st, and therefore a good reason not to do it, but to use that as a learning, period. And if there are any extensions to any of these timings, use that as the learning period, not just a hope that it might change completely, because I think we've seen that that's not really the case. So the key word is preparation. Use that learning period to try things. Talk to suppliers on the continent, because just as there are different interpretations from authorities in different countries on exports, there will be different interpretations by, if we take export health certificate, official vets. The official vets in the Netherlands are probably not going to behave exactly the same as those in France or in Spain for that matter, but talk to the supplier, learn how they expect to behave, and take advantage of those learning periods for preparation.
Yeah. Thank you, Chris. There are a number of points actually in the Q&A that I think you have covered there, and certainly one of the bits of experience that I'm seeing with their clients is the need to get the right processes in place at each end of the chain, not just at
Yes.
one. And that, I think, is a critical lesson we can hear today. I'm just going to answer one question, because I can, in the Q&A, saying, would you recommend a customs agent? Actually, the UK government is recommending that you hire a customs agent and get professional support to help on these issues. And I can see Victoria nodding.
Yeah, I mean, obviously that comes down to terms of trade as well. And that's where something like Incoterms is, outside of the EU, anybody that does trade globally is probably au fait with the Incoterms, but they are obviously now coming into effect in the EU, and it's never been more important to understand what they mean, and also for your business what you are willing and able to trade with on those Incoterms, because that is a crucial aspect of where the risk, the costs, and the obligations between the buyer and the seller are determined. So understanding on what basis you are willing and able to sell and trade is crucially important, not just to put on your paperwork, but to make your suppliers aware and the obligations within that. And even if selling on X works, it's still a case of there are still obligations on you as a manufacturer and proving the export, even though you've physically not come and collected the goods and they've been collected by your seller from your UK warehouse. There still needs to be proof that you can show HMRC in the future that those goods have certainly left the UK. So yeah, it's important.
Okay, if I can maybe just add one other point to that, Warwick, before you go to Jatin, yep. And that is the importance of taking a customs agent who has a physical presence in those short straits, in Calais, Boulogne, or if not, then make sure that you're signed up to one of the commie services that are given by Eurotunnel or any of the freight companies like DFDS or P&O, because if a vehicle is stopped in one of the BPOs, then you do need to make sure that you have somebody on site at weekends, at night, when the vehicle is there, with the necessary language capabilities to sort out the issues.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. I mean, you've touched on a couple of points that have come up in the Q&A, and just to link them, we did have one question, which was, my goods are blocked at the border. How do I find out why? And I think you've just given part of the answer. It is preparation. It is having the right support in place and the right type of support in place. I think there's another general point that I would just make before we move to Jatin, that I think deals with two or three of the questions that have come forward. Now, the UK is now a third country in terms of the EU. So all of the normal rules that would apply to a third country broadly apply to the UK. So we've seen questions about people bringing goods from the EU to the UK and then re-exporting to the EU. That is an export from a third country, and those rules apply. I have one client who manufactures goods in Belgium, exports them to the UK. The rules of origin show that they are clearly an EU manufactured product. There is no duty on them coming into GB, but when he then exports them to the Republic of Ireland, he pays 4% duty, because the rules of origin show that was not manufactured in GB. So I think that there's a general point about we all need to understand we are now a third country. Can I just move on a little bit to the positive side and ask Jatin to comment on the prospects for British business in the longer term and what opportunities there are, and maybe touching on the new free trade agreements. I know you're not political, so I don't expect you to pick up on the point I'm going to make, but the Conservative manifesto did give a high bar for the coverage of free trade agreements to be negotiated if they won the election, and they did. So we are seeing your department do a lot of work, and this is not just rolling over. I mean the Japan agreement does have benefits over and above the EU agreement with Japan. So looking at that, what benefits of going through this paying globally could come to businesses, and what support your department can give perhaps to SMEs?
Absolutely, happy to answer that. On the complexities about import and export, certainly the baseline message I think that everyone should take away is that the panel are right that there are some things that are systemic change, and there's some things that are waiting to find equilibrium. But no matter what, if you're going through problems, if you're going through, if things are becoming tricky and there's issues, there are tools and support that are available to help. So a lot of the publicity around what DIT does has been around the activity that we're doing with international governments, or with other governments internationally, and with the WTO when we're talking about trade deals. But there's actually the practical support that's available too. So I would really urge you to get in touch with DIT if you're a business owner or an operator, because if you need support, if you need help with trade, not just EU, I'm talking about globally, we have international trade advisors. These are people who work on your behalf. They can give you direct one-to-one advice and support to help you with any international trade issues that you've got, including EU stuff. And they can give you advice and guidance. And generally speaking, they can also connect you with experts. So people like Victoria, who are going to be able to give you that practical guidance. There's 100 and 200 people on this call right now. And I think if you all called Victoria today for support, she was going to not be able to get back to all of you at once. She's certainly in first point of call. I would definitely recommend speaking to her, but I also would recommend calling up DIT. We've got, you can go to the great.gov.uk website and see the support that's available. It's locally based in 9 English regions around the UK, plus the devolved administrations have support too in Northern Ireland, in Wales and in Scotland of equal quality and even resources. Now, taking the step onto the future and the path ahead, we're talking great. A lot of work has been done to try and create continuity agreements with different governments, where the EU had competency before to negotiate trade deals on behalf of all EU members. So trade was something that was negotiated, by the Commission, by the EU, and with a third-party government, so with like Japan or with Australia or whoever it might be. After now that transition's over, we are implementing a UK-specific trade policy, and all trade agreements are negotiated by the UK. So we are in the process of doing quite a few. So there's Australia, there's New Zealand, and there is the US. So the US one has gone through various phases. It's in progress, but I would imagine that you're most likely to hear news about Australia and New Zealand because of the relative stage of progress on them, and also because of our focus, the aspects that we've taken. So we've signed a great trade deal with Japan that has liberalized trade. There's data adequacy between the UK and Japan. There are new benefits, including changes about rules of origin, particularly that have benefited the UK fashion industry and textiles industry, to reduce the number of processes and complexities that need to be applied to materials to help them say that the goods are UK origin. So those are the positives. And when I talk about aspects, I'm talking about CPTPP. That's the next big thing. That's the next big bang that I think everyone will have heard of. That counts 11 countries. So that's Canada, Mexico, Peru, Chile, New Zealand, Singapore, Malaysia, Vietnam, and Japan. It's 500 million people. It's a £9 trillion partnership. We already do over 111 billion pounds of trade with the group, and it's been growing at 8% plus over the last 5 years. When we've already signaled our intention to join CPTPP, and that should be a real boon to future trade. And so the one thing to think about is, now that the EU requirements are that we are a third country and we're prepared to trade with them as if we're a third country, your business is already changing your own aspect to prepare itself to trade with all other countries as well, because the preparation that you need to do for one is the same as the kind of stuff you need to think about to prepare for the others. Back to work.
Thanks very much, Jatin. I've just been looking through the Q&A, and there's a couple which I think actually Victoria or Chris might be able to help with. Before I do, just one point on the free trade agreements. The Department of International Trade does consult industry very closely before its mandate is agreed to negotiate these. It tends to be done through trade associations, so there's a plug here for trade associations to make sure you have the input to that work. One of the questions I think, Victoria, you may be able to help with is how accounting for VAT has changed following the end of the transition and Brexit. Is that something you can comment on?
Yeah, it is. It's going to take me a bit of time to maybe go through it systematically. So what I would say is we could potentially come back to this in another follow-up session where I'd like to be able to maybe give a bit more detail. I'm just conscious of the time that we've got, but for sure the VAT changes are significant. What I would say for companies trading, obviously GB companies out to the EU, the new EU VAT reform, which is taking place from the 1st of July, will have significant impact, a positive impact overall, I would say, for British companies trading within the EU. There will be a new system, an IOS, import one-stop shop, that's coming into play, and an OS, which are extensions of the original MOS system that will be applicable, and that will help when accounting for VAT and will allow companies to basically declare VAT at point of sale rather than at point of importation, which I know a lot of clients and companies who are working particularly direct to consumer through the online channel have had a lot of problems with this, obviously trying to just deliver small personal parcels out. I know there's been a lot of problems through the courier systems and a lot of blockages there, but this will in theory help to help to support that and sort of make it much more simplified and an easier process. So that's coming from the 1st of July, and what I'd like to do is in a follow-up session potentially provide some more in-depth details on that, if that's okay.
Great. Thanks, Victoria. There's another question I think we might be able to answer quickly now, which is what is the UK government doing to ensure that all EU countries interpret the rules in the same way? I mean, Chris may be able to comment, but from my own experience, both in terms of the trade procedures, but also in terms of regulation as it affects Northern Ireland, there are continuing discussions between the EU and the UK government to try and get to an aligned point on those. That they're not dreadfully quick discussions. Some of the issues are quite knotty, but I am aware of HMRC, for example, having done some things to speed up some of these issues. So government is working on it, but I don't think it's going to be resolved overnight. Chris, do you want to add to that, or is that your experience too?
European states trying and get a common interpretation. And she is sending out weekly notes to veterinarians so that all official vets, even in the UK, who of course have to sign the export health certificates, are able to have those common interpretations. There are also meetings with the European Commission to try and get to get those common interpretations. I think the only thing that I would say is it is worth bringing to the appropriate government department every single instance that happens, because the process very much is of logging everyone and finding a solution to each one, which is a process that's known to many of us in project management, of not letting go to an individual problem until a resolution is reached. But if there isn't visibility of those issues, then there will never be able to be a resolution. So please, I know it requires a lot of persistence, but keep on raising it, keep ensuring there is visibility of those problems. And I would endorse Warwick's comment about the role of trade associations in this, who can also provide a visibility of how some of the regulations are changing. And it's important to remember that that they're not static; they are changing. We're going to see more changes to the export health certificate regulations coming in from 21st of April, and more products will come into scope as a result of that. So it's important to keep an eye not just on what the regulations are now within the EU, but what they are going to be in the future.
If I could just add to that as well, I mean, I think it's important to note 100% that yes, we do take these all of the issues raised, and we do take action or take account of them when we're talking to counterparts globally. For the DIT logs every single one and goes into a system. The team that's actually doing the actual work on the day with their counterparts is actually looking through these, categorizing them, and actually working through them. We're also, and other departments are doing the same thing, whether it's HMRC, whether it's BAYS, whether it's the team across at Customs within HMRC. We're all working through all of these. Trade associations are definitely a go-to, but your ITA is also logging them. If your international trade advisor from DIT is logging them too, so they're going onto the same system. I can also extend this to say it's not about it being suitable for now, it's also about the future. I wholly agree with what Chris is saying there, that you need to think about how to evolve through this, because this is not just going to be a now and we can forget about it. These things will evolve over time. Just in terms of the pipeline of things that are coming, we're talking about the changes on the 1st of April for imports. There's the evolving nature of travel of goods between the UK and Northern Ireland, but there's also going to be things like data adequacy when GDPR and the data agreements between the UK and the EU are going to come into play later this year. I think it's from July 1st. There are also going to be things like variations or adaptations to testing and the advances over time when things may diverge, you know, in a hypothetical situation later down the line. You know, when I can think back to when tests came into play in the UK in some of the sectors I've worked in before, like the LVD, EMC, REACH for chemicals. When those came in, you know, there was the process was, there was, you know, the policy was passed, and then there was an implementation period of about 2 years. The business could get ready and start doing things, you know, but that was communicated through trade associations, communicated through governments. You know, you need to make sure that you're aware of them through working with, through keeping an eye on them. And the best way to do that is trade associations or an ITA or a specialist as well, like Victoria.
Jatin, thank you very much for that. I'm aware of time. I'm going to come back to the questions and answers, but I'd like to ask each of you in one sentence, if you would, say what's your key takeaway that you think those who have joined this webinar should leave with. Let's start with Chris.
I think the most important thing is preparation. I've talked specifically about the import, the changes to imports coming up, and we have a 3-month window, maybe more, but 3-month window in terms of when there will be no physical checks behind it to get that paperwork correct. Get advice, get a good freight forwarder in use, and use the trade associations behind it. And if you do have issues, make sure they are raised and there is visibility of those, because that's how the relevant departments, DEFRA in the case of food or others, in the event of other areas, can resolve each of those, and it does not become an ongoing issue, or it does not apply to other people.
Thanks, Chris. Victoria.
So what I would say is to the businesses on here, the UK manufacturers and suppliers, if you are committed and serious about continuing with international trade, it's a strategic part of your business and your growth strategy, then you should definitely stick with it. I know it's difficult and it's challenging right now, but stick with it, because I believe this offers a number of opportunities globally in the longer term, because it will allow you to upskill, understand some of the requirements, which a lot of this is outside of the EU, standard practice, documentation, certification that is needed in other countries. So it will give you the opportunity to look further afield as part of your overall longer term global strategy. You know, support your customers in the EU markets. They're struggling as well. And I think the suppliers and the UK manufacturers who look after their customers in the EU, support them through their tough times for them as well, let's not forget, that will put you in great stead in the future, because I do think there's going to be a consolidation of suppliers from GB going out, because some businesses will fall off, some of them will stop trading, and that can actually open up more potential opportunities for you in the future in the EU. We've already seen through some of our clients that we're getting bigger orders, larger shipments, and you know, through supporting customers, we've seen a benefit starting to come through already. So if it's part of your strategy and it's what you want to do, stick with it, and in the longer term, it will all come good.
Jatin, with the injunction that we've got 2 minutes left.
Sure. I have to one plug for, you know, alongside GS1. One of the key things GS1 does is it works with marketplaces, and that's one of the main things that I do. So I have to cover that. We work with about 50 plus marketplaces in the e-commerce team, and those are all across the world: US, Australia, New Zealand, Japan. If you are a retailer or a business that sells consumer products and wants to sell in marketplaces, it's B2B and B2C. You're already a GS1 member. You're already set up to kind of, you know, harmonize and you know, say this is the product and this is what it is, so that it can be compared against everybody else's. You should be selling globally, and we can help you with that. So do call us. Key takeaway: support is available. There's a couple of anonymous questions right now about DEFRA, health certificates. Issues around, you know, you're a small company and, you know, you can't stick it out. I understand these are completely difficult things. I'm not dismissing the complexity of these things. There is support available, whether it's from the private sector who are specialists who can sit with you and take the time, or whether it's people who can just signpost you to guidance so you can do it yourself, or people like at DIT who can work with you to give you some support and to help you kind of overcome the common barriers. Most of these barriers that you might be facing are going to be common. They're not going to be really, really super specific things that only apply to you. So, do get in touch, get support, call Warwick, call Chris, call Victoria, call me, call DIT, call GS1. They're a partner of DIT, and get help. Do not suffer in silence. That's the most important thing.
Okay, I've got 1 minute now, Jatin. Thank you very much indeed. I'd just like to say two or three things in closing. I mean, what I've taken from this is Chris's preparation, Victoria's, it's now part of your business. It's not a bolt-on, and Jatin's, there is help there to be had. And I think if everybody on the call took those 3 points away, that's a pretty good outcome. There are a lot of questions. We felt we may not have time to cover all the ground we wanted to and answer the questions. Please go to the GS1 website where you can rewatch any of this webinar or other webinars, or sign up for future ones. You'll also receive an invitation to a second session at 9:30 on Wednesday, the 17th of March, where it will be the second phase of this, just focusing on Q&A. So when Victoria said she'd like a second session on VAT, that is your moment for it, and I believe you will get an email from GS1 inviting you to do that. We'll also, to David Little, talk about rules of origin. Rules of origin are only understood by 6 people. 4 are dead and 2 are forgotten. But that is the answer to your question, and it will take a bit more time to go over it, but we will do that in a couple of weeks' time. Thank you for joining. Thanks to GS1 for setting this up. Thanks for all of the questions, and we will pick up those in a couple of weeks' time. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.